Well, I'm sure as Father Chaz spoke at the beginning of Mass, I renew also my gratitude to all the moms out there. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. It's a great day, always a celebration, even though I did not pray hard enough for good weather. So I'm sorry about that, moms. Gonna have to remember that for next year. Pray for better weather. As we celebrate Mother's Day, however, it is not outside of the Lord's providence that we get to enjoy these days' scripture message, right? Especially this morning's gospel, that Jesus continues to preach truth in a very important moment for those of us who sometimes will follow along with the weekday gospel passages, but also here on the Sunday passages, we continue to be clued in, right? These little snippets from this very specific scene in Jesus' life that St. John records in his gospel in these chapters. It's the Last Supper scene, right? We know this. Right, and in this Last Supper scene, Jesus has lots of very important things to say, lots of important truths to speak. And the truth that we hear this day is about the truth of what his love means, the reality of what it means to be loved by God and to be called and chosen, right, by that love. I love it because of the way that it's also such an apt description of the meaning and explanation and understanding of mothers, right? In Mother's Day, the love of a mother. What does it mean for us to have, each of us, a mother, to be loved by them, to be brought into the world by them, and to know what that means, the significance of that then in our lives as we grow into young women, into men and women ourselves. I was specifically this week reflecting on a moment that I experienced as a seminarian several years ago when I was studying to be a priest. And one evening, the class of us got together, and I think it was a Thursday night, which is usually when we had these sessions. We would get together for sort of like pastoral conferences, pastoral training. Well, we had a gentleman come in, I believe he was a fellow priest, and he spoke on, for whatever reason, the topic of motherhood and of mother's love, and he read us a poem that night. And as he read us a poem that night, I was listening to those words for the first time, and I was thinking to myself, this is absolutely the best poem that I have ever heard about mothers. I loved it. Now, full disclosure, I haven't actually read that many poems about mothers before. But this one was still the best one that I had ever heard. And if I had heard many poems, this would probably still be making at least the top 5, if not the top 3. I never forgot it because of how simply it communicated an important truth in a really deep and penetrating way. And even at that moment, as I listened to that poem, I thought to myself, one day, when I'm a priest, on Mother's Day, I'm going to read that poem in a homily. And I've been waiting all these years. Now, you may not remember this, but I remember this because of the fact that I'm reading this now. In previous years up until now, Father Chaz has actually given the Mother's Day homilies. This is why you have never heard this poem from me before. But today's my shot, finally. After like 6 or 7 years of waiting, we all get to experience the glory that I had on that night with my confreres as a seminarian. And it was a poem written by a man named Billy Collins. And the name of this poem is called The Lanyard. I want to read this poem to you because it's just that good. As you listen to these words, I think you and I will read our own stories into this very experience, whether we're a child or whether some of us out there are mothers as well. And he wrote this: the other day, I was ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, moving as if underwater from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, when I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly. A past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid long, thin plastic strips into a lanyard a gift for my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard or wear one, if that's what you did with them. But that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim. And I, in turn, presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones, and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, is a smaller gift. Not the worn truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the 2-tone lanyard from my hand, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even. I think that is the most truthful words I've ever heard spoken or written about how a mother relates to their children and how children relate to their mother. And if there are truer words, you'll have to let me know because I haven't heard them yet. But I love that poem, and I love the punchline of that poem. Written, right, with kind of this wry humor that we all kind of smirk at, that nonetheless, every single person in this church knows exactly what this poem speaks about, whether, as I said, we are a child or whether we're a mother. And the reason I think it penetrates so deeply is because it simply is another way of describing the very words that are life-giving come to us from the gospel itself, out of the mouth of Jesus, his own heart. When he also speaks about love and what it means to be loved and to know love. And isn't this the truth, right? Isn't this the nugget of that very poem? That the truth is this, that love is not made even because it is repaid, because it can't be repaid. Love is made even because it is returned. Love is not a thing that can be repaid. Love is only a thing that can be returned. And in the return of love, we specifically know inherently that it's not measured by its size, because you can't really make a comparison between this love and that love, can you? The size, the shape, the grandeur, right? The sacrifice of a mother's love goes far beyond, by orders of magnitude, anything that a child could ever hope to even think about trying to start repaying. We just can't. But mothers know instinctively as well that what they have in their heart for their child doesn't exactly seek that kind of return, that repayment, does it? It's not like any mother raises her child and says, man, I can't wait for the thousands of diaper changes and all of the meals and all the blood, sweat, and tears. And then someday I just know that my child's going to grow up and they're going to become a responsible young man or woman, and then they're going to write me a big fat check, and then we'll be even. We'll be repaid, won't we? No, actually, something like that would insult a mother, because that's not the nature of what it means to love and be loved. A mom knows, as anyone knows who has ever experienced it, desired it, returned it, shared it, that love is not measured by a comparison of sizes. What makes love even is that it is given simply by its wholeness. That there was nothing left that wasn't given. Quite naturally, this is how a mother is defined. That she gives, there's nothing left that she can give. And in the return of that love from her own children, even if it is as small as a lanyard, what is it that a mother receives in that moment? But the fullness of the love of her child and the way that that child knows how to give it in return. And so all of us, right, whether we're a mother or a father or in some manner, right, we all eventually go through this moment in life where we just feel like we pour in and we pour in and we pour in. And we sacrifice to such a degree. And then there's evidently always, right, we come across that moment where that child or that student or that cousin, right, whatever it is, they come back and they just give us that one small little nugget of return. And we just immediately, we're like, it was all worth it. That's all I needed was a lanyard. And we mean it. We're like, I'd go back and I'd do it all over again just for this moment. Not because the moment repaid all of the things that were given, but because we know that what was given was returned in kind. And wouldn't you know it, right? When we hear these words out of the mouth of Jesus in today's gospel, John chapter 15, he speaks the very definition of what it means for us to celebrate this day, because he says this, remember, right? As the Father loves me, so I also love you. Remain in my love. And he says this, it was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain. This is, in fact, the only way that you can possibly define what the word mother means, and to be called one. To be called a mother means that you have already accomplished the words of this passage. Because to be a mother literally means you have borne fruit into the world that will abide into eternity. That the creation, right, of a human life at the hands of a mother and a father, right, in an intervention of God Almighty, brings forth into the world something that never passes away ever again. Because once you and I have been made, we can never be unmade. And our souls, which the Father in heaven has made eternal, has made immortal, right, has made immortal in such a way that even beyond our bodily life, we go on. And not only do we go on, but in the very end of all things, when Jesus makes all things complete, he even returns our body to our souls and also makes our bodies, even these material things, an immortal substance that also goes on for eternity, also goes into foreverness. The very love, the very definition, the very experience as humans that we have of motherhood and of being loved by a mom is such a personal lesson in what it means to be loved by God as well, which I think he designed purposely, didn't he? Because God is the same way towards each of us, right? Out of the completeness of who he is, holding nothing back, having given every blessing over to us. It's not like God stands before his creature and says, I can't wait one day for my little creature to grow up and then they're going to finally repay me for all of the good things that I've ever given to them. That's impossible. I think, as it were, if God hopes in regards to us, what he hopes is not that his love for us is repaid to him, but that his love for us is returned to him. Even though there's this great discrepancy in size, there doesn't need to be a discrepancy in its wholeness. And so long as it's whole, even if it be a lanyard, God says, that's enough. In a way, it makes us even. And so today, on this Mother's Day, we admit, as we do every year, moms, that there is no way possibly to repay what has been given over to us. And that the best that we can probably do is a lanyard. And even though that's the best that we can do, what we also do is simply give it to each of you with the wholeness of our hearts, to return to you what you've given to us in even some small measure, so that you may know, that we know, that even though it's never going to be even, somehow it's enough.